It seemed as if there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. There were experiments, hopes, new beginnings. And then came the build-up in Vietnam, and I watched this program broken and eviscerated as if it was some idle political plaything of a society gone mad on war. And I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor so long as adventures like Vietnam continued to draw men and skills and money like some demonic destructive suction tube. So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such.
50 years later, Reverend Dr. William Barber II echoes Dr. King's sentiment when it comes to America ignoring the poor. He commemorated the anniversary of Dr. King's speech with a sermon of his own called "When Silence is Not an Option." Here's a portion of that sermon.
We just saw an attempt, and they claim they're not over, to strip health care. My daughter was sharing with me that they wanted to take $868 billion from Medicaid. That would have been the largest attack on the poor pre the war on poverty. And think about the moral deficit that we're in, and why what Dr. King said about betrayal, silence would be betrayal, is apropos today. What stopped the bill? It was not, wait a minute, we should not do this. It was not, you know, we all put our hands on Bibles and swore ourselves into office, and if Jesus, who many of them claim they believe, did anything, he set up free health clinics, so we shouldn't be cutting people since Jesus didn't ever charge a leper a copay or anything like that. What stopped the bill? That there were people who wanted to make it worse. It was already bad. And what stopped it was a group who said it isn't hurtful enough.
Joining me on the phone now is Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. He's the president of the North Carolina chapter of the NAACP and president of Repairers of the Breach. Welcome, Dr. Barber.
Good morning, and good morning to your audience.
So what stopped it was people who wanted to make it worse. I'm still kind of shook by just hearing you say that again just now. And you're exactly right, aren't you, that the words of Dr. King are more alive and more necessary now than ever?
Indeed. I mean, you think about what we have happening in this country right now. As Dr. King in that speech took on the isms. He took on racism, materialism, and militarism. And in our culture right now, we have persons literally who want to lead and run and who are elected for office who promote modern-day systemic racism by refusing to address the issue of voter suppression, for instance, and by lying about the voter fraud. We just saw in the paper last night where Jeff Sessions is talking about considering rolling back the consent decree that have been placed on these various cities and police departments that have violated their oath in the way in which they've treated black people and brown people. We see poverty at an all-time high. We see candidates that are people that are willing to deny living wages and attack the poor. As I said in that about the fight over the Affordable Care Act, the people that didn't vote for it, that brought it down, was because they wanted to do more harm to the poor. And then we look at militarism. We're talking about spending $54 billion to an already bloated military budget. And what could we do with $54 billion? We could end child poverty in America. We could provide everybody with health care. We are in a moral crisis, just like Dr. King said then. We need a moral revolution of values. We need a moral revival.
Absolutely. And at the time that Dr. King gave that speech, I know, you know, it was not received popularly, but before he gave it, he was warned even by people within his own ranks that it would not be a good idea, as the speech was coming after Civil Rights Act was passed, after Voting Rights Act was passed. But he explains in the speech that he's not out there as a politician, he's a minister of the gospel, and he has an obligation to spread what's considered good news. And I know that you're doing the same thing, Dr. Barber. Can you just talk about the obligation, whether it's for clergy or any type of moral leadership right now, to speak out against the systemic ills of our society?
Well, he said that silence was betrayal. Dr. King knew that when you deal with the sins of injustice and oppression, you can't limit yourself, as some people want to limit him to just being a black leader or just speaking on civil rights. Now, remember, many of the same people also didn't really want him to speak on civil rights. But what they were afraid of is that he would unite the anti-war movement and the fight against poverty and civil rights, and that he was going to eventually do this Poor People's Campaign, which is one of the major reasons he was shot. Yeah, we have an obligation as moral leaders. We can't be silent. He said silent is betrayal. And one of the greatest silence right now that's sinful is how quiet many pulpits are and many people of faith are in the face of all of this oppression, whether it's the silence of so-called white evangelicals who don't deal with the issues, or whether it's the silence sometimes in our churches where people are very engaged in praise parties but are not engaged in any kind of protest against the injustices of our society today. Both silences are sinful. That's why I'm here today in Memphis, joining with Black Lives Matter, Fight for 15, the Moral Revival. They are marching not to remember, not to commemorate, but they're fighting for living wages in Memphis today, the same place Dr. King came and was killed when he was fighting for sanitation workers 50 years ago. 50 years later, they still are fighting for 15 in Memphis, and that's one of the reasons we'll be marching today in this effort to make sure that America does right by all of her citizens.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Barber, for all that you do for all of us. How can we help you? We are about to go to the break. Just tell us how we can follow and how we can contribute.
Go to breachrepairs.org and know that just yesterday we announced the Souls of Poor Folk, Auditing America 50 years after Poor People's Campaign. If you want to get involved, we're planning on engaging in a modern-day poor people, poor children's campaign, just like Dr. King talked about, and finishing it. And so if you want to be engaged in this campaign, go to breachrepairs.org and sign up so that you can be a part of it.
A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh, my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not going to let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally.
What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.